Hello and welcome to the Conscious Leader podcast. I'm Kirsty Waite from Kirsty Waite Business Coaching.
And I'm Dorrianne from DLC Coaching. We've collaborated to deliver a program we are super passionate about, giving managers and business owners control to inspire, empower and lead with authenticity, ultimately creating happier workplaces.
And each Friday we'll be coming to you with a discussion topic all around conscious leadership. Enjoy this week's episode. Hi, I'm Kirsty Waite.
Hi, and I'm Dorrianne Casey.
Thank you for joining us again this week on our podcast. And this week's topic, we're talking about coaching in the workplace.
Absolutely. So, Kirsty, what is coaching?
And that's a really interesting question, isn't it? Because I think for me, a lot of people aren't really 100% sure what coaching is, and it's a bit mystical, smoke and mirrors. What actually is it? So today, what I want to really focus on unpacking is what is coaching and what does that mean in the workplace, and how can we incorporate coaching as a style into our everyday leadership and management. And it's not really difficult to do. It is actually quite simple, but it's just about understanding the skill sets and the questions and how you go around taking someone on that journey of what exactly is their problem to helping them resolve it, to me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about a curious line of questioning. And instead, I think, especially as managers, we have this a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction. So when somebody comes to us with a problem, we automatically think that we can resolve it for them. Instead of thinking, okay, let me just take a step back for a moment. How can I help you in a different way that empowers you, that gives you the accountability needed in order to deliver that task? Mm-hmm. How can I get you thinking out of overwhelm, out of like frustration? And coaching facilitates that, I believe.
Absolutely, I agree. And I think the biggest point that you've just said there is we rush as managers and leaders to solve people's problems. Like, we want to be their hero. We want them to come to us and ask us a question, and we've got the answer there. We've got it. We know the answer. We can help you move on so quickly. Like, aren't we so amazing? And the only thing that does is it feeds our ego, and it also disempowers them. Yeah. So slow down on giving the advice. Strip out the ego and stay curious. And like you say, it's giving them that, empowering them to answer them and figure it out, and to them so they know they can answer those questions. They've got the answers inside of them. They just need taken on those steps by their leader and manager to get the answers.
Yeah,
and that's
absolutely.
The job of a manager, to me.
I also feel that as a manager, you come with this wealth of experience, or so to speak, don't you? So you feel like you need to share that wealth of experience. But I suppose what I would say is to that, you had to experience all of that yourself in order to have that wealth of experience, in order to share. Why take that away from the individual that you're managing, progressing, developing? And I think maybe that's the difference, actually. Although I do think mentoring and base and delegating definitely do have their place in management, it's about really assessing that situation. By offering my advice, is that going to serve them and resolve that situation effectively and efficiently? Or is that problem going to permanently come back to me as a manager? And am I then going to be expected to solve that person's problem all of the time? Because ultimately, when you do that, you're kind of setting a precedence there.
Not only that, you're limiting that individual's ability by your knowledge.
Yeah.
So you have this wealth of experience as a manager, but you've got to remember that's through your eyes. That's your knowledge and experience, and that's your interpretation of it, and that's your perspective of it. Whereas when we've got someone in front of us, we want to empower them to the best that they could be. And that potentially means be better and more successful than us as managers. And by us answering their question, you're limiting their development to your perspective and your knowledge. So we also taken that experience away from them.
Do you also think, and this is something that I thought maybe as a manager, if I was coaching somebody, do you think when you ask those open questions, there is an assumption there that your team member who you're managing, who you're leading, may consider the fact that you actually don't have that wealth of experience and actually you're a fraud as a manager?
And this is there's a whole industry about imposter syndrome at the moment, isn't there? And people feeling like a fraud. And it really is a true thing. And I get it. But it comes down to ego, doesn't it? And I think as a manager, we get that thought process of, I shouldn't be leading this team if I can't answer every single question for everybody that comes to me. When in reality, that's not your job as a leader of a team, is it? To answer every single question. But I can see where that thought process goes, and that negative thought cycle comes in, and that feeling that they should know everything. And equally, that going back to what you said before about the mentor and coaching, and the two very different things, and there is place for both of them in the workplace, and there has to be, because you do at some point have to guide and tell somebody, and they need to learn how to do their job and how to do certain tasks. So there is space for both, and it's understanding when it's appropriate to use one and when on the other one, if that makes sense. And where coaching fits into that, because when we rush in straight away with the answer, we not empowering those individuals. We not encouraging them to be creative and think. We telling them, therefore leading them to disempowering them, but limiting their growth and their knowledge.
Yeah. There's some really, really good points. And I love the fact that you mentioned, it limits their creativity. It doesn't allow them to really kind of think outside the box, and it strips away their level of accountability. Because I think as a manager, when you tell somebody to do something, not only are you disempowering that individual, but the accountability rests on you almost as well as a manager. So not only do you have, I don't know how many people you're managing, but let's say you're managing a large group of people. Not only are you taking all the accountability of them, you've got your own level of accountability as well as a manager. You've got your own job. So I think this is where coaching really, really plays its part. I have a question for you, Kirsty, actually. And you mentioned actually the difference between mentoring and coaching there, and actually how each one has their time and space when they actually show up. But for our audience purposes, when is it appropriate to really start, coaching somebody? When do we really know the difference between actually when we need to step in and mentor and when we need to step in and probably coach?
Yeah, and that's a really great question. And for me, it's when say somebody's new to a team or new to a task, you then step in as the mentor. So you using your knowledge, your experience to really help that individual, to show them how it's done, to who they need to speak to, where they need to get information from. So you're taking them on a journey of their own learning. Okay, so you first of all showing them all these things, and then you're kind of going, okay, show me how you do that. How do you do that? So then you're testing that they can do it. And then comes the bit where, okay, so I trust you now to do that. I'm going to step away as your mentor. And then you'll come into a coaching facility of, okay, so when you come to me with a problem, you start talking it through and you're asking them questions and you're listening and you're learning and you're understanding on a deeper knowledge of what's going on. Because you've got to remember that when we employ somebody, we employ them to fill that role and to complete their own tasks. They're the expert in their field, us as a manager can't be an expert in every single field of every single person that we are managing and coaching, and leading. So we have to trust them at some point to do their job. So that's how I believe that's the natural flow into how you would move from mentoring into coaching. But when you've got to think of, if someone comes to you with a problem, when you're thinking, should I mentor or coach them here? It's, do they have the knowledge? Do they have the skill set to do that? Because you can't start coaching somebody who has no idea on a topic or a subject that they don't know anything about. So if they're new to something, they need guidance. They need that mentor. They need that, this is how you actually do this task piece of work.
Yeah, absolutely.
If it's somebody that's experienced and it's somebody that has sat in a role for quite a long time, and that they just kind of stuck in their own thoughts and they're looking for help and guidance, that's when you would step in as a coach and you would take them on a different journey of exploring together where they stuck, what they're trying to achieve, and how you can help move them forward by asking questions and getting them to think through the challenges themselves, and then coming to an action point themselves rather than telling them.
Yeah, I know, absolutely. I find that when people are stuck in overwhelm is often when they probably need a coach as well. And like you mentioned, actually, there, it's differentiating whether that overwhelm is down to a situation where they have the knowledge, they just can't see the wood through the trees, or it's actually the fact that they're lacking knowledge, there's gaps in their knowledge. And that's probably where the difference lies between maybe mentoring, training, to actually coaching through that process. I mean, what other things really differentiate between like the coaching and how can we where am I going with this questioning? Maybe actually let me ask this question. What sort of coaching questions are out there that we can really support the people that are watching this with?
Before I answer that question, can I just say a really important thing so if someone's listening and they're thinking, I'm not a coach, how am I meant to coach people? The first thing I just want to be really clear is that it's accessible to everybody. Yeah. It's just a conversation and it's a way you do it. But it doesn't have to be. When people think of coaching, they think of sitting down one-to-one, face-to-face for an hour with somebody. It doesn't have to be that. It could literally be everyday conversation of what's up, what have you got going on, and what you're trying to do, and having those conversations and starting them. And it could literally be a 5 to 10 minute conversation where you're taking them from a place of, okay, what's going on here? What's the problem? To getting them to figure out the solution. But then it could be a conversation, and it literally is to help them with their thought process. So I would invite people who are thinking, well, what kind of questions do I ask? They don't have to be big, fancy, flashy questions that are super intricate and hard to say or remember. They're really, really simple, and it's taken somebody. So it's exploring. So the first step is exploring with somebody and starting to understand what's going on here. Like, what is your problem? What are you really trying to achieve, to a point of action? So then you're taking them from, okay, so talk me through, what are you trying to achieve? How important is it that it's resolved? Because sometimes it could just, people get stuck in their head, and actually it's not really priority or important for the overall project, this one piece that they're stuck on. But it might be, and it's gauging, and it's getting an understanding of how important is it, what they're trying to do, and what's stopping them from doing it. What have they tried already? What's holding them back? And then also, can they do this on their own? Because a lot of the time, people feel that they can't do it on their own. They need help from others. They're not getting the support from others. So then you need to kind of explore that with them of what's in your control and what isn't, and then understanding what steps they can take. So those questions there take you on a bit of a journey from start to finish of, tell me about your problem, tell me more, understanding how important is it, what's stopping you and how can you achieve it and what can you control? You know, you're
absolutely.
Them on them steps.
I love the way that you've explained that as well, the whole process and journey. I think that really helps with understanding, you know, really how to kind of maybe structure your questioning as well. And keeping curious about exactly what it is that they need support with around that. And I think you've actually brought up some great questions. And I think if anybody was listening, you probably noticed that they started with like what, how. So you got what, how, where, when. These questions really open up the conversation. What you don't want to be doing is asking closed questions that really just will get a yes no response, because it's not opening their mind up, it's not getting them to think about their situation rationally as well.
Really simple questions is like, as well, is like, tell me more and what else. And it's like, it's just getting them to think below the surface level, because when someone's stuck in a problem, they've probably, like you said, a bit overwhelmed. They've gone round and round in circles trying to resolve it in their head. They've got their own biases of what needs to happen and what's going on and what's getting them stuck. But sometimes a bit of reflection and questioning to just get below that surface level. And sometimes they need to just come down a level and just take a breath and just think about it, talk it through with somebody. And that just unlocks something. And they're like, actually, I haven't tried that. Or if I did that, that would have that result, you know. And it's getting them to think about it from a slightly different perspective, rather than this is what, as a manager, going, this is what you should do, and them going, okay, thank you, and off they go. And then when it doesn't work out, they go, well, you told me to do that. That's your fault. There's no accountability.
It's going back to that level of accountability and stripping it away, and then suddenly what happens is, as a manager, you're sat in overwhelm and you need coaching to get out of that.
But don't get me wrong, there are times when you're coaching somebody and they really can't just find the answer. And that's, as a manager, if you take them through that journey that I mentioned before and they're still struggling, try asking it a different way. And if they're still struggling, you could ask them if they want your opinion or what you would do. But it's a question. You're asking for permission. You're going, would you like to hear my perspective, or would you like to hear this? And that's not doing is, you need to be careful that you're not leading them to that. So you're not manipulating the questions to lead them to that. It's really staying open without judgment.
Yeah, again, a great point. Open without judgment. I think that's really key to what coaching is all about as well. Just taking a step back, not making those assumptions, not judging the situation. And I think that's, I don't know about you, but I think that's a really easy, making assumptions is a really easy step or a thing to do. Just because, you know, you're in an environment, you probably know that person, you know, there's an emotional connection, you're working with them on a constant basis. Or even if you aren't, you are still connected in some way. So you're working with them on a regular basis. And sometimes it's just, I think it's a natural thing sometimes to just step into that role of like, okay, well, I'm assuming this is what you mean, without actually really listening with intent. And actually then palming off your advice without any permission, as you mentioned before.
And that's just leading to so many different things to me. So you've got your assumptions, you've got your judgment, which as human beings, we do so much without noticing. And we've got our unconscious biases that come into play. And before you know it, you've assessed their situation. You know the answer that you think they should be doing. You trying to manipulate them down this path of doing what you think you should be doing without even asking one question. And we think we're doing it for their best interest. That's what we tell ourselves. It's easier and quicker if we just tell them what to do. Then they know. When really, if they understand and take themselves on that journey, go off and experiment and experience these things themselves, they're learning, and then they know, because they know within their own remit and in their own perspective of what that is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think from there, let's just go through everything that we've just been through. I think we picked up on some great points about coaching. I mean, there's definitely more to it than that, and it certainly takes practice as well.
Yeah.
It's not something that will happen overnight, but just to be conscious of it is pretty important. So
Yeah.
we've learned that coaching is a tool accessible to everybody. Anybody can use this style and line of questioning in any environment. You just need to take your step back, evaluate the situation, and ask those curious, open questions.
Yeah.
The how, what, where, when questions.
Yeah.
And then removing your ego. Now, ego is like a bit of a I don't know, when you say ego, it's like, oh my God, you've got this picture of this arrogant person, don't you?
It's not. It's
No,
absolutely
it's not.
not.
Everybody has it.
Yeah.
Everybody has ego. But it's being conscious of it, just taking a step back and removing assumptions and judgments. And that's where your ego plays in. And this gives you the opportunity as a manager to really just show empathy as well with the situation. And what that builds is trust. You're building rapport and trust with that individual.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's try to stop going to giving the answer or the advice as your first port of call. So instead of rushing to tell, ask a question. Like, just even if it's one tiny little change in the way that you speak to your team, is that make the first thing that comes out of your mouth a question. Just something so simple, and listen to understand. Listen. Don't think, I know exactly what I'm going to get. I know what the response is going to be. And while you're getting it, thinking of the next question, you need to listen and really understand. But I think that's a great top takeaways for the session today. We did a blog on our LinkedIn page this week, and it takes you through the really simple steps through a coaching conversation, and it gives you some simple coaching questions that people can adopt. So I feel like to add to this conversation, if you want to learn a little bit more, go along and read that blog, because it gives you some further insight into how to incorporate coaching into your everyday work and environment to help improve the performance of your team, and also make it a happier environment for people to work in.
Absolutely. Oh, well, thanks very much, Kirsty. It's been a great conversation.
No problem. Thank you.
I hope you all benefited from it. Sorry, go on.
I think it's been a great conversation. And what I was going to say is just I hope that they come back and join us next week, because we're talking about how to manage conflict next week. So that's an interesting topic to unpack.
I think so. Complicated, but we can help you strategize this.
Absolutely. Okay, so thank you everyone for coming to listen, and have a great week.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for joining us this week. We hope you enjoyed the discussion.
If you're interested in learning more about the Conscious Leadership Programme, reach out to myself, Kirsty, or Dorrianne via LinkedIn and find out more. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Have a good week.